Welcome back to another episode of Agents Unleashed. I'm Mark Richards. I'm joined by my friends Niko and Stephan. Last week we looked at the way in which AI is impacting the role of the product manager. This week we're going to look at the way it's impacting the world of the architect. Now, just before we get into the show, let's just check in here. I know that around about 15 years ago, I could call myself an architect. So I've got vague memories of what it was like to be a real architect. How about you guys? Do you have some point in your past life where you go, yes, I was an architect and I collect that?
I should keep my my cards. I think one was with an architect, but I replaced it now. It's a long time ago.
How many years ago was yours?
Let me think. 15? 10?
All right, so 10 or 15 for me, 10 or 15 for you, Stephan.
Yeah, a little bit more. I was lucky. I was forced by my mentors and by my leaders to act like an architect all the time. But the real being an architect also like 15, 20 years ago. So it's far away.
All right. So you are going to get
that's fun, Stephan. Sorry, Mark. May I? For me, was the opposite. As an architect, it forced me to think more in business. So in business terms, in client needs, etc., it was more the path to do something else than IT. Sorry, Mark.
No worries. So now that we've set some perspective, we've got three people who are dinosaurs and once upon a time were architects. And we're going to tell you what we think about the way that AI is going to impact the life of an architect today. Because it might be a long time since any of us really were architects, but we've spent a lot of time coaching and in the trenches with architects since then. So in the next hour, we're going to dive into what it means to be an architect when the tools, the expectations, even the pace of learning have all shifted under our feet. Right? What makes a good architect now? How can AI make it sharper, not redundant? How on earth do you keep up when the ground keeps moving? And just to warm us up, I suspect Niko's been talking about the Lord of the Rings with his kids recently because somehow or other thinking about architects made him think about Gollum. Over to you, Niko.
Yeah. So when I looked back in the early days, and it was before Agile, many of the architects and you, it feels like being Gollum. So you're alone, some kind of schizophrenic. You're hunted. Nobody really likes you because you're demanding and know everything better, and you have to do it that way. You're some kind also in your ivory tower and decide everything. And I thought that's not a career path for me because I don't like this being alone and it's my architecture, my precious, and I know everything and you know nothing, something like that. But that's really in the pre-Agile phase. And then with Agile, the change agent profile became more and more important. So then my role models as architects were people who were highly communicative for their nature. So, because usually I know architects are much more introverts than extroverts, but the people tried to be part of a team, tried to exchange with people, and they did a really amazing job. Then I thought, okay, that could be now something that I like to do because I want to architect something for a user, for a company that has a value, etc. So where my passion is in this part, being an architect, is creating something with other people, and I think this notion has changed from pre-Agile to Agile. And the question is, how will this change now? And I think it will continue this part in doing things together and not doing things alone.
Over to you, Stephan.
Interesting thoughts. For me, it feels like a special moment for the last few months or this year that never stopped. And this special moment regarding the role of architects is a lot of questions resurfaced, like, I'm now in this era of AI as an architect or as an information system engineer, where in the old days we were told you are the ones who do the thinking, and there's this group of engineers who then will make it work or will make it happen, right? So kind of a hierarchy, kind of some distinctive role descriptions, and now with AI, it's an immense opportunity that arises, but also a kind of a threat for my role as an architect. And you already mentioned that, Mark. How can we get sharper? How can we get better? So I now have more countless design options. How do I deal with that? I still am responsible for sustainable and efficient systems. And before they become efficient, they should be effective, right? Now we have implications of algorithmic design, something I'm probably pretty bad compared to AI. And in the end, we discussed it when we talked about ethics. What is something that is really client focused, but also safety critical? What are my responsibilities? How do I sharpen my profile to not be neglected in the future? So I have lots of questions, and I'm looking to some answers today when we talk to each other.
So I've got quite a few friends who are architects, weirdly enough. And running through my head at the moment, there's three architects. So shout outs to Daniel Lowe and Drew in particular. These are guys I met on a coaching gig in Sydney like 12 years ago. And we really connected, and we spent many, many long nights late in the beer talking about architecture and the modern world and what makes a good architect. And, there was a running joke between us all, which was that architects are people who used to be technically competent, right? Because the longer that you've been an architect, the longer that your hands have been generally off the tools and on the PowerPoint tools. And, the kind of shared philosophy, and I think what we bonded over was that good architects don't necessarily know the detail, but they know how to find the smart engineers who do know the detail and bring them to the table in the conversations. And that the more distant, the more further you go down the architecture path, the more it is going, what should I be worrying about? And what kind of experts do I need to be tapping on the shoulder so we get the big picture together? So if we take that kind of frame in and I go, right, today, 2025, you're going to put AI architect on your LinkedIn headline. What would you have to be able to do or explain to deserve it? And how would you differentiate yourself from the way that an architect might have done that 2 or 3 years ago? Let's go to Niko. I'm sure he's going to give us a non-technical slant to kick things off.
You're right. So I think it's like in the ways when you start writing enterprise architect and people didn't get what you mean with enterprise architect, because an architect is a tech guy, as you said in the beginning, has a tech background. Now, what the heck are an enterprise architect? And we did well with that to understand that that's more about enterprise capabilities. Dear safe folks, don't talk about the safe capabilities. I talk about the enterprise capabilities. With the AI architect, if this would be part of my LinkedIn profile or part of my card, we should be careful that not people think we are AI nerds and technology nerds, because that's something that bothers me a lot these days. That people think AI is still a technology thing and not a huge part of a transformation or huge part of history, story, or whatever. So if it was on my LinkedIn page, I would explain to people it's similar like an enterprise architect. I care for the problems, I care to find solution, and I'm not the one with the highest knowledge about all the frameworks and anything else. It's maybe like when I started my education as computer scientists. People thought I can build computers and I can fix anything. And I was just a software developer. I was in algorithms. I was in databases. I was in UI. So I, by the way, I'm one of the persons that never built his own PC. I just bought it. I didn't have time for it because I put my... I know, Mark, your heart is dying now. No, so that's always hard for me when people assume AI architect or AI is technology. It's not only.
Okay. So if that's the make sure that you can talk about the business application of AI, Stephan, what are you promoting on your LinkedIn profile?
I'm not putting that label on me at the moment because I think it wouldn't help, right? Because people wouldn't get what they expect, like you said, Niko. I think there's like 2 to 3 things I would like to see in an AI architect, or if someone puts that label on his CV. First of all, you need really providing advanced technical skills in AI. But not only AI. AI for me is kind of a buzzword. And it's not, for me at the moment, it's not artificial intelligence. It's about machine learning. It's about deep learning. It's about cloud computing, stuff like that. And what I'm actually doing at the moment, not being perceived as a guy with a label on his head. I'm going through Stanford courses on YouTube, diving again, Niko, into computer science and what basics I should know as a computer scientist or as an information system engineer. Unless I don't master that, unless I don't have that knowledge, I wouldn't ever put that label on my LinkedIn profile. Second one, what I really would like to see in an AI architect is, do you have evidence and proof of AI design you did? Because hey, I've just read some CVs or some profiles where people state, I have 10, 15 years of AI experience. Come on, show me what you did. And then I would say, are you an AI architect or are you just a fake, right? And the third kind of area or domain I would look for, and you mentioned that a little bit, Niko, is how can I now bridge strategic planning with execution? Because that's my duty as an architect. Make it happen by helping others to then come up with a solution. Maybe you have to ring fence the design a little bit more than they would like to have it. So a lot of technical skills, evidence that you can do it and that you have done it, unless it's not there, take away that label and think in a strategic way, right? And really show, and we probably will talk about that one as well. There's an expectation from your senior management to you as an AI architect. And can you cover that one?
Niko.
You just made me realize, Stephan, about something. When we talk about AI, it has so many different meanings. Because I just did the math. 25, 26 years ago, I had neural networks as a part of my my major in computer science. So I have now 26 years experience in AI because I was part of a seminar. Now, and I'm joking a little bit. But the problem is what AI means is also a question. Do I mean generative AI? So if somebody says he or she has more than 5 years experience in generative AI, I hope they are part of OpenAI or a company that started early, because otherwise I will not believe that. It's like people saying you have 20 years or 30 years experience in SAFe, which is not impossible, or I have 40 years experience in agile. If you're not wrote agile or one of the founders or one of the one signed the manifesto, you're not have this experience. But with AI, the problem is it's a too broad field. And maybe we're talking now in this episode about the generative AI, which then shrinks it to maybe 3 years.
Well, I think for me, that's one of the interesting surface areas, because I would expect, for example, that somebody labeling themselves as an AI architect could talk to the different types of AI and the different types of application, right? Because we're up in the stratosphere. And the instant, and I think so much of the world at the moment is going AI equals ChatGPT. I think it's some of the guys I know who've been playing with machine learning and ML ops for years and years and years have an incredible amount of knowledge in that space, but perhaps not quite as deep in the latest LLM stuff. And that for me, if I was just thinking a little bit more about the LinkedIn question, I think the other bit of the architect is, you've got to know the business problems you're solving at some level, depending on the flavor of architect you are. You've got to know the stuff to worry about, but you've also got to have your hand on the art of the possible. And your job is kind of equal parts inspiration and fear, I think, as a good architect. Look at what's possible, but we should be scared of this. So speaking of what's possible and we should be scared, let's go to, I think, the thing that an awful lot of architects around the globe are really challenging or being challenged or faced with at the moment, which is there's a tension between an executive excitement about AI and reality. And I reflect on this every time I sit down and go, I'm just going to surf YouTube a little bit. And when you surf YouTube, you get interrupted by ads talking about virtual employees, right? Guaranteed. Well, you certainly do if you've got my YouTube profile. I'll get a world of ads about how, we bought these tools and they made virtual employees for us, followed by ads about how, with 1 hour in NA10, I replaced an entire marketing agency and our entire social media profile. And all of these, gee whiz, look how quickly we can do something. And these are the stories that are exciting many executives about the possibilities. But what you know, if you know anything about it, particularly architecturally, is there's a large gap between some theoretical virtual employee and the social marketing strategy you can build in an hour on a tool like N8N, and what it looks like for enterprise grade responsible AI with appropriate levels of governance and security and everything else going with it. So if you're an architect, how do you balance that tension? How do you sit between those two extremes? Who wants to take it?
Let me start with that one, Mark. What you just described is a dilemma, right? And dilemmas occur many times during your work. And I think the dilemma is between those like senior executives or senior management who's now riding a hype wave, not knowing exactly is it a good wave? Is it leading me to where we should heading with our enterprise, and us as technical people who then design systems, and it's the same like 20 years ago, 30 years ago. How do we provide practical and safe implementations of what we want to achieve, right? So you need to have a strategy. And the strategy should now balance for me the ambition versus how much risk do you take in a new field where there's lots of innovation, there's lots of speed. We will talk about adaptation as well, right? How do you set realistic constraints, or how can you paint a picture to your senior management that they understand what is really AI? What are we talking about? Is it a buzzword, or is it becoming more realistic at the moment? And then it comes down for me to some stuff that probably most of the architects didn't learn, didn't study, and didn't probably train in that area, is communication and roadmaps, right? One of my first questions, no matter who I meet in a transformation or in an enterprise context, I ask for roadmaps and how do you communicate your intent? So balancing this is pretty important. And if I look back the previous episodes, now what kicks in as well for me is governance. Do we have some rules? Do we have some data quality that we base our evidence on? Otherwise, it's gut feeling and it's hearsay and it's a lot of mystical stuff, right? So for me, balancing those different areas is like translation work I have to do, but always asking the question, what is the business benefit in the end? I'm faced with senior management now that has ingenious ideas, but I say, what does it help now in the life cycle of our system? How does it help us regarding strategic intent for the future? So I do a lot of translation work as a coach, as an architect nowadays, to make sure that people understand what they are talking about. And that's for me one of the big things you should master, or you should be confident about how you do it and how you bring it into the system.
I love your answer, Stephan. I love it really much because it started with a technical question, with a hype question, and we ended up with something we at least learned in our early days. Young people have to learn this. It's just not classical. It's just change and stakeholder management. Mm-hmm. At the end is knowing your transformation. And I had a lot of déjà vus when I read the question, when I listened to you, Stephan. It's skills we already, so architects that are since years architects or once one architects are the same skills we had in bubbles and trends before. It's just proper change and stakeholder management. And this year I was again in a class about AI. It was the AI native change agent class. And for me, it was not really so much new, just some different lenses, different vocabulary, different aspects of compliance, etc. But at the end, if you go one level higher, if you fly a little bit higher, it's the same questions you always ask when you do change management, when you try to adopt new technology. Yes, I'm with you, Mark. It's really fast outside, and you have the feeling you're missing something. Understand business that just see an ad and think we have to do this too. In my experience, business usually always had crazy ideas and do it immediately. So I was, by the way, on the UI side of developing. So all the crazy idea came to me. So I want to have this. I want to have it Excel-like UI, which was impossible 30 years ago, and so on and so on. So they always had crazy wishes. And now all the crazy wishes have an AI flavor. And handle them was always part of my life. And I'm sure it's also part of old architects having a past. And for new architects, please please start doing stakeholder management and change management.
Yeah.
So I'd like to challenge both of you for a second, right? Because I think it's easy, and I think the more that I play in this AI-enabled change model, the more it's like, well, this is agile that we've seen for years. But I think sometimes it can be a cop-out to go, well, it's just human skills, change management skills, stakeholder skills. Because I think sometimes you've got to get some tangible, practical skills to go with them. And I think it's the difference between how do I deal with change management versus how do I deal with the situation as an architect. Because the thing that's running through my head, right, while I'm listening to you and completely empathizing on the human side, is if I'm asking a fresh question in the space of AI, let's think about the last 10 years where a lot of what the architects have been doing is mobilizing cloud transition. And if you think about, your typical architect thinking about a cloud strategy, they're asking an enterprise to stump up multiple $100 million, right, to get into a position to responsibly use the cloud. And you've got to look at the sensitivity of your data and the influence of regulators. You've got to look at the choices you make between different cloud providers. You've got to understand the potential strategy, whether the use of effective containerization is going to give you some level of transportability between cloud providers. It's a whole bunch of knowledge you've got to have in order to put together not just the business case and the energy of the organization to invest in it, but to actually lay those foundations. Because quite often, in cloud, I saw it in enterprise after enterprise, they'd spent, 2 years and a couple of $100 million before there was anything tangible to show for it. Because so much of it was about how we're going to secure and regularize and, demilitarize and so on and so forth, our cloud. And you've got the same situation with the architect going, well, yes, it's exciting and we need to be able to do it, but boy, there's all this provisional infrastructure we've got to put in place. How are you mastering that as an architect, right? Because that's not just change management, it's knowing what you've got to worry about and how to build a business case for it.
Let's tell a small story. When I was younger, so I told before I was on the UI side of developing, so I really developed UIs, and I was one of the rare UI specialists, because in those days UI was always the thing you give the intern. The lowest educated one gets the UI, the other doing the real stuff, the enterprise stuff, etc.
Yeah.
And I was on this side doing a real UI, great UIs, a great architecture on UIs. So my best spot is the architects usually had not so much know-how, but they knew if it's about UI architecture or UI frameworks, they can rely on me. And I think one important part of an architect is not know everything at best, knowing to whom reach out to create a team to do the transformation. So I'm with you, Mark. I need some kind of basic skills. So I should know what LLMs are as an AI architect, but I'm not sure if I should have done myself and custom ChatGPT. Maybe I should know how it works. Maybe I should experiment with something. Okay, as more I know, the easier it is to find my blind spots. But at the end, I think the job would be having a team around you who helps you, who have the deep knowledge. And for that, you need some kind of an overview knowledge and maybe a deep dive in some areas you have fun to dive in. But I'm not sure if you should be an expert in everything AI. But I think you didn't mention it this way. You said something similar.
It's interesting. Based on your question or your statement, Mark, and what you said, Niko, for me, that's the exciting part being an architect. There's a kind of a tension. I do have to know what the technology is. So I have to be ahead like 1 or 2 steps. Otherwise, how can I give guidance? If I don't master that, if I don't know what's behind it, if I don't have a certain depth, I wouldn't call myself an architect or a designer, right? Because I have to be ahead. The other thing is, again, as we said, and my experience from the last few architects, workshops, classes, working with business, immediately it boils down again to what is your strategic intent? How do you cover that with existing technical skills and infrastructure? What's already in place? what's the life cycle of your systems? And that includes change management, but what's the change management part for the future? And this triggers totally different discussions. You mentioned cloud, Mark, right? I took place in so many cloud initiatives, and after a few months or years, after spending millions, we found out that the assumption behind what we did was wrong, right? We wanted to save money with the cloud initiative. We found out, no, it costs more money, but we have more flexibility. We had to revise the intent. We had to revise based on the context and what we found out what it is. And this is for me the interesting part as an architect. Am I at the forefront of where we evaluate assumptions? Am I part of where I see it works or it doesn't work? And how fast can I adapt to that one?
Interesting. So let's stay in that place. And I'm going to throw back to you in a second, Stephan. But let's keep going into, how do I make choices? Right? Because if there's one thing, right, and coaching agile with architects for years, we've all faced this, is architects are paranoid about making decisions that create technical debt, right? Most architects that I've talked to or I've coached over my life, the biggest struggle they have with an iterative model or emergent thinking is, what if I make a mistake and I create a world of technical debt that I'm stuck with for the rest of my life? And I know I used to, when cloud started to become a thing, right? I used to talk about the jokes about the architectural timelines that we used to love to live by, because most enterprise architects that I would chat to, let's say 10 years ago, would say, if the timeline is shorter than 5 years, I don't care about it, right? My job is to think in the 5 to 8 year horizon of the blueprints of where our enterprise is going to go. And I used to joke and go, well, hang on a second, 5 years ago, did the cloud exist? And, how do you feel about any plans you made for strategic futures when you made those plans in the complete absence of cloud? But you look now and you go, how fast is this AI landscape changing? And, what I'm watching quite interestingly is that, as usual, it's the open source and the niche players who are at the absolute forefront. But you watch the big platform providers, you watch the way that AWS is moving with their bedrock capabilities and Amazon Q Business. You look at the way that Microsoft's playing in terms of their agentic framework and their co-pilots. You look at OpenAI and the capabilities they're producing. You look at the Google, right? There's this agglomeration that says, well, in AI speak, the niche players are about 6 months ahead of the big platforms, and the big platforms are just absorbing the niche players. Like, how do you make any kind of durable decision about your architectural intent with some level of comfort that you're making the right trade-offs? Stephan, why don't you kick us off?
Interesting question. I've learned from one of my ingenious military commanders that when you are presented with a challenge or a situation, don't jump to conclusions. Start scratching on the surface and find out what are we talking about, and how do you make architectural choices when the landscape is changing so fast? You could you could drown in that speed, right? Trying to please everyone. What are we talking about? And I did some sketching based on your trigger, Mark, and I did some AI research, and I was asking, what are still core responsibilities of architects, even if the landscape changes that fast, if you have new technology changing on a weekly or monthly basis? And guess what? I was really surprised. What popped up is you still have to provide ADRs, architectural decision records. You cannot not decide. At a given time, you have to decide. Sometimes you only know 20%, and you have to decide. You have to give some guardrails to the people you're working with. Second one is, it's high-level designs. Don't come up with a concept which is pitch perfect. You have to live with that tension. And the third one, and that's part of change management as well, a source that is often neglected in an existing landscape is IT service management. You have to deal with that. There's a lot of triggers. There's a lot of source. How do you improve? And how do evolve your existing landscape? Because your landscape is as is with all the buildings on it, the infrastructure, the services you provide, but also the planning ahead. How does it look like in 5-10 years time? Even if I don't know, does the world change that fast, or does that rate even changing faster? So I would say it's now going back to your question, Mark, based on their core responsibilities, the mixture between durable and dynamic is what is like a backpack on my shoulder or on my back, right? I have to continually learn what is the next domain. I have to be more proficient, or is there any new stuff I have to put in my backpack? Flexible frameworks, right? If you can't provide modular design or automation because you're hiding behind a framework, no matter if it's called TOGAF or whatever, you're not doing your job, right? And again, at the surface, balancing innovation versus stability, right? You can have a lot of innovation if your existing landscape doesn't provide the service or what people expect, you're lost, right? So I think, again, I have to, and that's what I've learned the last few months, I have to take out time to invest in myself. Continuous learning, being 2 or 3 steps ahead. And then to live with uncertainty, nothing new, right? But in the old days, we had enough time to come up with a bespoke, perfect concept. You have to decide maybe on a weekly basis. You have to maybe decide on a daily basis with the information you've got. And I would say don't chase every new buzzword. Don't chase every idea that's on the table. And sometimes I'm not going into social media or on platforms. So I have enough time to reflect, sit back, and go back to my core responsibilities to help the system or the social system to then act appropriately. Long answer, sorry guys, but it's you probably could feel that it's some of my passion as an information system engineer, as an architect. How do I provide from the back of the room the context and the situation that people feel comfortable to deal with? Is it more about durable stuff? Is it more about being dynamic and testing the waters to then be fit for the future?
Niko, do you leave any space for you?
Yes, and
sorry,
so many
Niko.
pictures now in my so many pictures in my head now, and you're absolutely right. Pudding is flexible. Try to build a skyscraper with pudding. So you have to decide where are the pillars, where is the stability. This is a decision, and you have to take one. You could do this part stable, or the other part is a decision. You have to document it and be sure that you cannot change pillars on the fly. You have to build something else to make these pillars flexible again. So it's really the decision log, which Stephan mentioned, is really an important part still in AI. If you chase everything, if you chase every girlfriend, you will never marry and never have a stable relationship. It's your choice. But if you want to have something stable, you have to decide. And not deciding, by the way, is also a decision, but now a philosophical answer to that. So my summary is you will decide anyway, right? Because you have some education, you have some experience. You can choose A or B, and usually A and B will be a good architecture. It will be just different than the other one, but you have to decide with information you have. And the point you have decided, I'm convinced this decision is the right one. I'm really convinced in that. When I was younger, I was always external. I was only 2 years in a startup, and then I thought I need more this new stuff. So I was to say external, always the architect or the engineer who was new in a company. And then once I decided to stay for 5 years with a client, just to see how my decisions are wrong, and at the end they weren't wrong, not because I'm incapable of judge myself or be mean to myself. It's just because we documented this part of the architecture is stable. It's the pillars. And we knew if we want to change the pillars, it needs some kind of reconstruction. And because this was clear, it was not a wrong decision. We just realized after 4 years, for instance, this decision making this wall stable wasn't really the right one. But it gave us the opportunity to experiment, to find things out. And then we had to redesign or refactor the whole application, the whole architecture. And it was also okay. And the building looks still fine. And I met now still the business owner of years ago. It was really one of my early projects when I was an architect there. And it's still working. The house looks still nice, looks differently, but it works everything. So just document your decisions and be sure you will decide right. If you're not Beavis and Butthead, you will decide right.
I'll let your successor will laugh at the decision you made. Stephan, it's felt like you've wanted to talk and then you've backed off. Are you still keen to chat or?
No, it's good. I just read Harm's question. Maybe we could cover that in conjunction with what we already talked about.
I'm going to take a segue to Harm's question, cool. But just on the way through, here's my 2 cents. My 2 cents is this, and really practically. If you're in an enterprise, you can cut the amount of AI learning you've got to do quite significantly by saying to yourself, who is our cloud provider, right? So if you know who your cloud provider is / who your model provider is, then there's a fair bit that says that's the ecosystem you've got to learn to exploit.
Yep.
Right. And, if you're an AWS cloud provider, it's going to be Bedrock. And by extension, it's going to be the foundational models that Bedrock has access to, which means that you're going to be an Anthropic person for a fair bit of your life, right? If you're a GCP cloud provider, it's going to be the world of Gemini. If you're an Azure cloud provider, it's probably going to be Microsoft Copilot, but there's a squeaky chance that you might go down the direct OpenAI path, right? So you can shrink a little bit just by going, what's my surface area? There's core stuff that they're all trying to build into their platforms. They're all going to try and maintain feature parity. You can shrink the change. The other one is, and it just came to my head because funnily enough, I was doing some work earlier today on how to prompt a GPT to do adaptive planning well. And it pulled a quote out of my quotes highlight file from Artful Making, right? And I don't know if you guys remember, it was a long time ago now, that book. It was one of the first agile books I read. And if you haven't read it, it's a great read. It's about a discussion between a drama professor and a technology professor about the similarities between putting on a drama performance and delivering on a technology outcome. It's a brilliant book about the art of iteration and learning. But one of the things I really focused on is what's the cost of change? When you're making a decision, think about the cost of change later. There are some decisions where the cost of change is minimal because it's really, really easy to iterate or change your mind. There are some decisions where the way in which you make the decision, perhaps like the coupling level of your architecture, will make it less costly if it's the wrong decision. And there's some decisions where it's going to be really, really difficult to change your mind. And boy, you better know what you're doing before you make them. So that's my on the way through. But to come to Harm's question, how would you explain or defend an AI-based architecture to higher management? And what about uncertainties from that? Who wants to take it? Stephan,
let me jump in.
It's all yours.
It really tickles me. I would, a discussion with Harm, I would say, get rid of AI-based architecture. It's your architecture, like Niko said. You're building a house. You're extending your landscape. You're changing some zones in that landscape. And AI is just an approach, a toolbox, a lot of what new and modern architects would use, but don't call it AI-based, right? Only because it's the buzzword or it's the hype of the time. It's about uncertainty, right? We're building houses for hundreds of years. We know how to build houses, but what about if you come up with a new idea, if you have a huge arch stretching some areas and you need new approaches, you need new practices, new methods. And we are talking about how do you deal with uncertainties. And talking to the senior management, I'm not surprised, but still disappointed that senior management is still looking for the waterproof plan for the next few days, weeks, months, and years. It's about uncertainty. It's about you're testing the waters. And what now comes in the AI era is, and I'm probably throwing the ball back to Mark, is how do you evaluate your assumptions, your design, against what do you code, against what do you build your systems? And this is the discussion I would have with senior management. How much uncertainty? How do we evaluate? Which then creates certainty, but I wouldn't call it an AI-based architecture. It's just the architecture we have, and we're kind of developing this architecture in a way that we are future-proof. My 2 cents. Mark, evaluations.
So I'll add just a little bit on the way through to that jiggle, right? And here's a little bit I would add. Firstly, I would go to the classic, and I think Marty Kagan says it best, right? What are the answers every product manager must provide? Do customers want it? And I'll paraphrase, can we make $1 giving it to them? Are we capable of doing it? And is it safe to do? Right. So that kind of collection of questions, I think when you're looking at any kind of architecture, you've got to be able to think about that architecture in light of the key product management questions that you're exploring. But the other thing, and this I think it goes back to cheating and coaching agile architects, is the last thing that I did to finish my days, and it really was probably the thing that finished my days as a solution architect. The key artifact architects produce historically is a solution architecture document, also known as a SAD, and really well named because quite often when you read one, you feel sad. And I was working with a architecture team who was reviewing architecture inputs from a lead integrator on a large program. And we had contractual things that limited how much we could be involved with them while they were drafting the SAD. We knew we had some concerns about what we were going to see. They handed me a 700-page SAD. And I took my red pen and I went to a coffee shop and I bought a lot of coffees and did a lot of stuff with my red pen and got to the end of it and went, I feel like it would take me longer to describe how to fix it than to suggest they just write it again from the beginning. But that's that kind of thing of the architects. I want all the detail up front. And what I've tried to coach for is the big thing you need to do is say, what's the big picture? And then what are the key architectural risks involved in the big picture, right? And then what you want to do is you want to think about how do I bring the risk evaluation forward so that I progressively de-risk it based on the learning that I'm getting from my early work, my early iterations. And if I thought about how to convince or how to establish a safe way to enter the market with an AI-based architecture, I would be asking myself how my incremental strategy is progressively biting off pieces of risk so that I had learnt an awful lot before I got to my larger risk exposures. And so how do you bring that kind of risk-based thinking into your iteration plan or your incremental approach? That'd be me. But let's go to a jiggle. Jiggles. If AI...
May I say something, Mark?
Oh, go, Niko.
Sorry. I think if you have to start defending your architecture, you're maybe on the wrong space in argumentation with your business people, because my architecture always solves a problem. So if I have to explain my architecture, maybe I'm not solving the problem the business has. That was my thinking, but that's why I was struggling with the question, because I never had to explain my decisions. I just had to say, that's what I'm doing, that's what I'm planning to solve this problem. So I think if you're in the explaining mode, maybe you just jumped too fast in a solution and now you have to explain why you want to spend some money in something fancy. If AI helps you in your architecture to achieve the goal, then I think you have to explain something else than your AI architecture.
Isn't it interesting how we all jump to slightly different perspectives on that?
Yeah.
Because I jumped to executives going, we don't want to be like Deloitte.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, yes.
It's really interesting exploring our different wiring on these things. And speaking of different wiring, let's go jiggling.
Which is good.
So if AI impact on the architect role were a planet or celestial body, which one would it be? And we're going to start with Stephan.
I've chosen the biggest one, Jupiter, right? Largest planet, it's massive and transformative. And that's what AI is on our architect role. By the way, it's powerful because it has gravitational forces. I think, and we probably all are experienced that it's reshaping career trajectories, skills, and the meaning of architecture, right? Becomes really an important part. As you said, Niko, can we explain that the design is really helpful solving problems? Jupiter has this red spot. It's a centuries-old storm. There's a lot of turbulence. There's a lot of dynamic change. Welcome to the era of AI. It has many moons, multiple dimensions. And by the way, it's a huge gas giant. No solid surface. constantly in flux. And that's probably pointing back to Harm's question. I probably can't provide the solid surface, but I can show how this thing in flux is kind of working and organized.
So that means I've got to come next, because I actually hadn't looked at your answer when I did my thinking. And I chose one of Jupiter's moons.
Cool.
So I chose Io, which is apparently the most volcanically active body in the solar system, because it's constantly reshaped by tidal forces from Jupiter and other moons. Right? The landscape's never static. The ground's constantly balancing and moving beneath you. There's a constant renewal through pressure and instability. And you've got to find some way to survive in that environment.
Oh, great. I had discussion with myself during try to find the answer. First, I thought, could it be the meteorite who extinct the dinosaurs? So, no, that's too heavy, because it's not so much big change being an architect and having AI impact myself. Then I thought, so maybe it's Venus, because it's faster. AI is fast, and AI architecture maybe is also fast. We talked about decisions we have to take faster than before. So the year is faster than on Earth, so it's faster. But at the same time, the day is slower than a year. So in Venus, a day is longer than a year, which somehow fits for AI. It's so unlogical and logical at the same time. And then at the end, I thought, no, it's Earth. Life is there, evolution is there, it's Earth.
Sorry, I got to pick up on that. The punchline there, it's Earth.
Welcome to Earth.
Welcome back to Earth. Ground yourself. Have a nice day. No, all right. So let's move on. Let's talk about how, right, we've done a lot about what AI is doing to an architect, right? To the expectations, to the environment, to like what's coming at an architect because of AI. Let's flip direction and let's talk about how architects could personally use AI to make themselves more effective. Niko, why don't you take us away?
Yeah, I didn't struggle with the question, but I had to think a lot, because for me, architects are always the role model. So in my notion, what an architect is doing, they are also a role model. And what I'm not expecting is them being the ones who are pre-thinking everything and saying that's the way to go. And so I think how architects can personally use AI to make themselves more effective is being a role model, use it for yourself, and don't try to be a commander and say, and everybody has to do it that way. So make a suggestion. I tried this. I think this could help, because I think in these days, what you need as an architect or as a leader is the opinions of the others. Because of the time issues that Stephan already mentioned, that you have to do so many decisions in such a short time frame. If you do everything on your own and don't use the brain of the others, then it's an epic fail. So use AI for yourself, for your job, and make suggestions what could be an environment that the enterprise, that the things you are building are working, and use also the brains of the others. So make it possible that others can also experiment, that then you are the only one and alone, like Gollum in the beginning.
Stephan, where are you taking Gollum?
Yeah, let me stay in a simpler environment. I'm from a countryside, and if you go on a construction site, you see the tradesmen and the architects talk to each other. You can feel if the tradesmen accept the architect or not. If the architect is talking about something in a theoretical way, but never has used it or doesn't know how it really works, simple tools like a hammer or a spanner or stuff like that, right? It doesn't work. So for me, using AI, for sure, I need to know how it feels, how it works, how it helps me. And how does it help me? There's probably two areas I'm exploring at the moment. One area is about workflows of how we design, how we work together. And I'm using AI as a personal sidekick, helping me to define patterns, or even before I define patterns, to recognize patterns. And that's what LLMs are great for, right? Using that data and giving me that picture, and then defining, okay, how am I using a pattern, or should I develop patterns further on? The other thing I'm using in workflows is, and I'm pretty new in this area, how do I curate architecture graphs, right? There's lots of documents, there's lots of solution intent, there's lots of sets, right, Mark? And how do we show the connection in a visible way that people have a tangible picture to dive into the context? And the third option in workflows for me is, how do I design guardrails and how do I create feedback loops in a way that I get the information back, right? Not only designing it, but making it work. So that's workflows. The other one I'm looking for, AI, is about augmentation, either the good stuff or the bad stuff or both, right? So it's not just automation for me, it's augmentation. And that kicks back to what we discussed, this human AI interaction. And I'm probably, and the research kicked that off for today, I'm probably more a curator, and I have to become a critical thinker, even more than what I do nowadays. Not just picking up stuff and using it, but dissecting it, first principles. And if I can't do that, I'm probably not a good facilitator as an architect. That comes last. So curator, critical thinker, facilitator, AI supports me in all three domains.
So I'm going to add one more. And it's actually,
Great.
I'll give a slight backstory to it. All right, are you guys familiar with Art Smalley? Have you read any of his stuff in the lean space?
Heard about, yep.
Okay, so Art Smalley, if you go back to like the gang who did all the original lean books, who are hugely instrumental in the Lean Enterprise Institute, Art Smalley's one of those. And I've read a few of his articles over the years. He had a book called 4 Types of Problem Solving, which was just spectacular. And he's written a lot on the LEI. And I was reading an article he wrote, and he started this series about what he's learning about how AI and lean go together. And, you know, his first post on it was basically, mea culpa, I've been saying it's a joke and it would never be useful for years. And boy, I've learned some more and now it's not. But the story he told was of discovering he built fundamentally an agent that he felt could do a better job of facilitating a 5 whys exercise than 90% of the trained 5 whys facilitators he'd seen in his life, right? And he looked at it and he said that there's a scale unblocker here, because what you want is everybody to have access to great 5 whys root cause analysis facilitation. And it's been a barrier because we haven't been able to scale ourselves enough with good 5 whys facilitators. And when I got an agent that did better than 90% of the ones I'd seen out there, it certainly didn't do as well as me, but boy, it was a scaling problem. And this is one of the stories I'm seeing coming out of a few places. It was like, I've just started reading Co-Intelligence. And, you know, the opening story is by Ethan Mollick from Wharton Business School, I think it is. And he starts out and he goes, you know, we've done a lot of gamification and training in the art of negotiation and simulation-based learning. And I had a moment where I wrote fundamentally a custom GPT that would act as a negotiation advisor to somebody. And I tested the negotiation advisor for the prompt that basically took me about half an hour to write against simulations we'd spent months developing, and it did a better job. And so I think there's this piece of scaling, and where I think gets really interesting for architects is I have coached so many architects who are stuck in the detail and can't get out to the strategy, right? It's like every time you launch an art, part of your journey is to help the architects to get out of the weeds and out in front of where the art's trying to go, focusing on their architectural runway rather than the day-to-day decisions. And it's like, oh, here's the coaching conversation. You've got to train your devs. You've got to coach your devs so they can think like an architect. And that allows you to elevate yourself up to more strategic thinking. But I look at this and I go, can you develop agents that kind of bottle your brain and your thinking and the knowledge that you think to exercise? And can you start to make them available to your engineering teams as a first port of call so that you can scale yourself and your wisdom by doing the work to distill it? And it makes an interesting project for you as an architect. You develop some skills figuring out how to do it. And boy, it frees you up to start changing the way you work as an architect. So I think there's a lot of opportunity.
I'd call it the forcing function, Mark. force yourself into some stuff using AI to then be a better facilitator anyway.
So that takes us to our closing question. And, we've talked a lot about learning. We did a whole episode on how we're learning AI. If I think about trying even vaguely to keep up with everything that's changed in the world of AI, it's kind of crazy, right? We're all trying to do something, and I know my summation is no matter how much time I spend, it just affects how fast I'm falling behind. So how does an architect catch up and keep up with all of the technical and regulatory change AI is driving?
I have an easy tip. That's stay calm and make friends. So when I see what Marcus is doing, it's good having him as friend because I got a huge summary of the last week, and then I know, okay, that's maybe 3 things I can dive deeper. When I talk to Stephan, I see he did something else this week, so I can also learn from him. So I just realized I cannot keep up with that. So don't make stress out of it. And the other important thing is also adaptation is never fast as the trends are. So in this case, it makes me keep calm. I will miss a huge of things, but it's like with marriage. You miss so many ladies, and you took just one, and it's a perfect one. So you will miss a lot of opportunities, but it's okay because the ones you dig in deeper helps you, and you will never know what you missed because whatever you learned brought you to a point which made the world better, the enterprise better, your life better. So stay calm. You will miss a lot of things, but the ones you are catching are the right ones for you.
You never told us your wife watched the show, Niko.
Forgot that. Okay, no.
Let me pick up the keep calm from Niko. Yes, keep calm, but only if you have a clear strategy and if you know what problems we want to solve, right? And when it comes to all the technical and regulatory change, we shouldn't forget there are some constraints. There's legal inertia, and you have lots of international coordination issues at the moment. The only thing I can do is observe and be proactive, learning what are they talking about, what are the issues, and what should I take into account at the moment. Everything else comes later. Because the same, what Niko said, I used AI to say, okay, regarding those topics, how much time should I reserve the next few weeks and months? And he came up with a plan for 3 years. And I said, never, ever. I wouldn't be able to do that. So let's stay focused. And even when it comes to regulatory or technical issues, we already discussed that. Mark said, if you create a feedback loop and if you can create that in a way that is a guardrail supported by AI, that's how you leverage automation in your context, in your organizations, right? So even for regulatory issues, for ethical issues, bake it in, bring it into the system. The other one, what I think is, Niko said, make friends. When it comes of strategic adoption, you are responsible as an architect to bring in the technical side, the design side. That means you should act by design. And I've been in situations where I was reactive, not proactive. So for me, this question triggers, how do I stay proactive on my mind, observing, catching up what's going on, and then deriving what is my daily plan, what is my weekly plan. Let's talk roadmaps.
Well, I feel like I've just got to completely geek out the way we wrap this. So here's my completely geeked out way, right? AIs thrive on context. Build some context documents. Who you are as an architect, what your background is.
Yep.
What does your organization do? What kind of products do they use? What's the technology landscape for your organization? What AI choices have they made so far? What's the regulatory landscape that your organization sits in? Once you've got all that context, then ask yourself how many hours a week you want to spend learning about AI, and then build an agent to set your agenda every week, right? You give it the context and prime it to help you make the right choices about where you're investing your learning time. You might be surprised how well it does that. So, final notes from the guys. Stephan, your closing thoughts?
So I really think we have great assets as architects. And the takeaway for me is becoming a curator and an enabler rather than staying as a gatekeeper, right? We talked about that one. Bridging what Harm threw in bridging business with how we create systems that have really beneficial impact on our organizations. That's my takeaway.
Well,
Niko?
that's great, because if you're a gatekeeper in this world, you will just be blown away. You cannot keep the gate alone.
Yeah.
So I'm with you there. So mine was influenced by the last question. Adoption rate is lower than innovation rate. Keep calm.
So that brings us to a wrap on this exploration of AI and architects. It's amazing how, no matter how technical the topic we pick, we'll wind up talking about human and change. Go figure. That's the purpose of this podcast. So next week, Ali is back from whatever his latest adventures are. And I know one of his breaks, like they're buying a houseboat or something one day and fitting it out. I can't, he lives a very exciting life. And next week, the exciting life is Ali coming back to challenge us about the impact of AI on agile teams. So thanks for joining us. Thanks, as always, Harm, for adding in a couple of fun questions for us to play with and being here with us. And we will see you next week.